In the quest for the All the Mods star, tons of work has to be done, from tech mods to nature mods that are disguised as tech mods, and more. A lot of these mods need to be fully completed to obtain creative items in survival. I'm going to try and do it. Applied Energistics 2, Immersive Engineering, Blood Magic, Draconic Evolution, and many more. All of the mods, right? In this series, we take the pack to the sky. This is the second episode of my 100 days run. In the last 100 days, it was all about setup, a bunch of mystical agriculture work, defeating the Ender Dragon and Wither, setting up a mass storage network with Applied Energistics 2, getting villagers, and much more. In this 100 days, I take my little island and progress onwards, refining my automation, expanding my storage, and increasing my power generation by quite a lot. Not as much as I'm planning next episode, but a lot. This episode will go a bit quicker for viewing as quite a lot of what I did took a while, some even taking whole days, so expect a few days to fly by or me just not even to talk about a day. Additionally, I do jump around quite a lot from mod to mod. That's just how I play, I can't really focus on one thing for too long. I am Bedrock Burger, your local praise Lord Vivek kind of guy. Make sure to do the things that the good old YouTube likes to do. Burger love you long time. With this leg of the journey, I have a few goals set in mind to do in this 100 days. The first is to maximize my storage system, taking AE2 into overdrive. Second is all the modium to unobtainium progression. I wasn't able to get all the modium in the last 100 days, but I shoot for it here. Thirdly, swap my mystical agriculture setup all to use Thermal Series' phytogenic insulators. Fourth, Apotheosis Enchanting, becoming very overpowered. And finally, take down the Chaos Guardian from Draconic Evolution. Easier said than done. Will I accomplish these goals? Will I be destroyed by the Chaos Guardian? Yes. Will I figure out what the heck Mechanism does? No. Stay tuned and find out as I survive 100 more days in All the Mods 9 to the sky. But first, before we fully begin, I am still relatively new to tech mod stuff. If you have any tips for me, I'd love to see them in the comments below. Just make sure to watch the full video first, okay? Returning to my floating palace once more, it was time to get going. On the first day of this journey, day 100, I had updated to a newer version of the mod pack, so I claimed some quests and looked over the new Draconic Evolution quests briefly. There was a lot there that I would get to later, but first I needed to tie up a loose end from the last 100 days, swapping my mystical agriculture setup to use pipes from the Pipes mod, instead of using its own mini ME system. I also took some Insanium I had produced last episode and changed the farmland of my Inferium plot from Supremium farmland to Insanium, bumping its output from 300% to 350%. For the rest of the day, another loose end. Stairs are for peasants, so I swapped a few floors of my Benelith over to elevators, which were made from ender pearls and wool. Jump to go up, crouch to go down. Simple. Could be camouflage, but I decided not to, as I would probably forget where they were. With day 101 coming, I finished the swap to elevators and looked to make a mystical agriculture seed that would be extremely helpful in the long run. Steel seeds. The recipe for steel itself was a bit rough, and it wanted 4 1x compressed steel blocks, which was 9 blocks each, so I needed 36 blocks of steel total to make the seeds. So I got to work all throughout day 101 and into day 102, where I slept into it. Not too long into the day, I actually finished the steel seeds. These will be major help in the mechanism progression, as a few mechanism items require steel, like the cables. I planted the seeds, then twerked my burger butt off to duplicate the seeds, planting enough to last me a while. If you didn't know, with mystical agriculture in this pack, you could actually twerk to grow farmland, any farmland, and seeds had a chance to duplicate, assuming they were tier 4 and below. As I learned later, this investment of steel seeds would absolutely pay off. Next up, I did need to better my power generation. I was making enough for now, but with how much tech I would need to make this episode, I needed better generation, so I started to upgrade my thermo generators up to the blazing tier, using the energizing orb to make blazing crystals from blaze powder. The first thermo generator produced 840 FE per tick, which was way better than the 450 that the other ones were making. If you didn't know already, RF per tick, FE per tick, and OP are the exact same things. They're 1-to-1. Anyways, I continue my upgrading into day 103, finishing all of them by the middle of the day abouts. It was enough for now. But I turned to my next project, automated sieving with each of the materials. I added a new floor to the Benelith exclusively for the sieving setup and got to work, starting with cobblestone sieving. I used cobblestone generators and a single flux hammer and a single flux sieve to get the automation going. Right now I'd skip on upgrades for them as I couldn't afford the power drain just yet, but on day 104 I finished automating sand as well, using 2 flux hammers this time. One to go from cobblestone to gravel and then gravel to sand, and then they get sieved. I also upgraded to advanced cables for mechanism to move power more effectively. I set up AE2 patterns for diamond barrels and diamond stack upgrades, then in day 105 I finished automating dust using 3 hammers and a sieve, go figure. All of these sieve outputs started with cobblestone generators, but I only used tier 2 ones because tier 3 was a bit overkill. I also used an igneous extruder with gravel underneath and lava on either side to automatically produce netherrack to be sieved. I hooked up a hammer and a sieve to that as well, as sieving netherrack gave blaze powder, still a limited commodity on this burger island. I was almost done with sieving what I wanted to do for now, just blackstone left. The only issue, I needed ice to get it, as I could use an extruder recipe to make a blackstone. I'm on a skyblock. There is no ice. But there is a way, however, and it required me to go into the Forcecraft mod. Problem solving. There was a type of furnace that could freeze water into ice, so the progression started with force ingots, made from gold ingots and force crystals, which received from dust. In day 106, the force progression continued. I made the force infuser, which was the primary way to progress through this mod. It allowed me to take force items and infuse them to make new items or add modifiers to force weapons and tools. It needed an upgrade tome to get to higher tiers of infusion. But how to upgrade to higher tiers of infusion? You needed to infuse. To get my goal of ice, I made a force furnace, which could have a core inserted to change what it would burn. I needed to reach tier 2 of the infuser, and the infuser started at tier 0, so I got to work. I made a force sword out of some force ingots and force sticks, and made some force armor as well, then used various materials to infuse them. You didn't need to infuse too much to get to a tier 1 infuser, but I did need to infuse a few items to get there. I almost thought it was bugged since I couldn't infuse the same item twice, but that's probably just how the mod is. I got up to a tier 2 infuser, then used a book and a bottle of enchanting to make an EXP tome. It's stored experience and can be used in certain recipes within Forcecraft. When day 107 came, I made the upgrade cores, which was the template to make the freezing core for the force furnace that I needed. I then realized that I had no snow, and I needed snow to actually make the thing I was going for. I didn't initially want to take the Head Start quest, but the Head Start quest had ice, and obtaining ice would complete a quest that gave snowballs. So unfortunately I had to take the Head Start quest. I obtained snow, broke it into snowballs, and then made a snow cookie, which I infused with an upgrade core to make a freezing core. I can now take various water containers and freeze it into ice. A water bucket can make packed ice, and I need blue ice for the blackstone generation using the extruder. It took a few minutes, but I set up an igneous extruder with lava on one side and blue ice on the other. Nothing required below. That produced blackstone, the final sieve automation I would do for now. With a netherite mesh sieving blackstone, I could also get isnium, an important material for occultism mod's later progression. The main downside to blackstone sieving is that it produced an absolute ton of blackstone pebbles, so I started work on a pebble recycler system, finishing it on day 108. It used a flux compressor to compress the pebbles back into blackstone, which I just kind of piped back into the drawer that produced the blackstone. I used item pipes to pipe the pebbles from the output chest to the compressor, also from the netherrack sieve output as well, as netherrack produced pebbles as well. It looked awkward, but it worked, so that's good, right? Function over flavor this time. Usually I go for flavor over function, but function this time. With day 109, I wanted to start expanding my AE2 network ME. I was tired of going back and forth to my ME access terminal, so I made a wireless access point. I could add boosters to increase the range, using more power the further out could go. I then started work on patterns for AE2 processors, as they were absurdly annoying to craft. It would take me through day 110, and I still didn't figure it out. No, I didn't do any research, why do you ask? I made a new charger to give to a villager so it would trade AE2 items. The second villager I got, after the first one, mysteriously disappeared, sold skystone ingots used to make the universal press. I struggled throughout the day in trying to get the processor autocrafts to work, but failed to do so. I did make the ME extended pattern provider to store more patterns, then made the wireless crafting terminal. Don't laugh at my setup right now, I'm still not used to 82. Laugh at the one I do later instead. Day Bilbo's age was spent reorganizing. Needed right now as I was preparing to max out the ME controller network. I just kind of moved everything around, made it look nice, set up a little space for a big ME controller network. But I also do the same reorganizing on day 112, crafting all the ME controllers I need for a max setup. I moved all my 82 machines to the center of the room, leaving a space for all my controllers. To max out an ME network, you needed controllers within a 7x7 area, only connecting up 2 sides, not more. The most common setup I see in videos that have applied Energistics 2 is just to make a cube outline. I couldn't max out the setup yet as it drained my power instantly. Each controller used a bit of power to run, and more controllers was much more power. In day 113, I finally figured out the autocrafts for 82 processors. Add a second inscriber. It's as simple as that. One for inscribing the material into the processor bases, and a second to fully assemble them. And with that, my processor autocraft worked fully. I immediately requested a craft of a stack of each processor as I'd really need them later on as I got higher and higher in storage needs. I made 4 acceleration cards per inscriber to make them craft almost instantly. With the processor autocraft all done, in day 114 I made skystone seeds to have a constant supply ready to go whenever needed. I would actually not need this for a while. I also hooked up a pattern provider to the energizing orb for my power setup and made some patterns, including all the Modium, as it required the energizing orb to make. I did forget to lock it though, at first. My bad. As day funny zombie number song came around, I decided to upgrade my sieving setup to double the ores it produced. But how? I could use a flux compactor to compact the ore chunks into the ores themselves, then use an enrichment chamber to act as a crusher for the ores, turning the ores into dust, doubling their output, 1 ore into 2 dust. I gave it max speed upgrades, 8 out of 8, then in day 116 I remembered to lock the crafting on the energizing orb pattern provider, then returned to my power setup upgrading. See what I mean about jumping around a lot? I took some time to finish upgrading all the way to blazing tier now that I had a lot more blaze powder for my sieving. Benefit of resource automation. When you pause a project because of lack of resources and start working on another, there will be a ton of it when you come back. Blazing tier for all my thermal generators was still unfortunately not enough to run a max ME, so I started on the next tier up, Niotic, which required me to make Niotic crystals in the energizing orbs. Diamonds were inserted in, and Niotic crystal came out. In day Master Chief Petty Officer 117, I made my first Niotic thermal generator, upping the power generation from 840 to 1680, exactly double the previous output. This is per generator, by the way, not my entire setup generating 1680. Throughout the day, I would continue upgrading my generators to Niotic as I had plenty of diamonds. By the end of the day, I swapped all my blazing generators to Niotic, and it was barely enough to run a max ME system. My power generation currently could maintain a max ME long enough for when I eventually upgrade my power setup later on. Some of the thermal generators were empty, but I still had enough. Once the automatic sieve finished going through all the resources that had been building up the last episode, the power usage will drop and stabilize. That's why I added a netherite furnace with the factory upgrade to my sieve setup to smelt the dust to produce an ingots. Power setup barely stabilized, add more power drain. Be a man. With a furnace now smelting what I was producing in day 118, it was time for more upgrades. However, tragedy struck. It's the most tragic thing ever. My crusher demon buddy I never used, it died. So sad. Anyways, for a bit I had to babysit my furnace just to make sure everything worked, killed a wandering trader, then upgraded my enrichment chamber I was using up 2 tiers to an advanced enriching factory, which had 5 slots to match the netherite furnace. I then started working on the next power tier, Spirited, this time slapping emeralds in the energizing orbs to make Spirited Crystal. I made a Spirited Ender Cell for my wireless power needs, then shift right click the Niotic battery into it, upping its max capacity to 104 million FE. In day 119, I made patterns for each storage component in AE2, then tested it by auto-crafting a 16K storage component so I could upgrade my crafting storage. I finally figured out what those do. They move materials from a main ME storage to the crafting storage to begin the auto-crafting process. The bigger the storage on it, the bigger the autocraft can be, and the more autocrafts you can do at the same time. Next 100 days I do plan on absolutely upgrading the heck out of my autocraft setup. My current one is very bad right now, and I only end with 2 of the whatever the autocrafted things is, matter somethings? I don't know. After upgrading that, I started an autocraft for a 256K storage component, as that was the max for the limitless item discs. It finished up after a mere 40 seconds, so I made it into a 256K disk drive. It started filling up real quick. I would continue to play this game of storage throughout this 100 days. Until Hobble's video on a full run of All the Mods 9 came out last week, I actually wasn't aware that I could have multiple disk drives on a single ME network, so this 100 days I do struggle with storage, especially towards the end. The entirety of day 120 was spent simply hooking up my MA, Mystical Agriculture, setup to my ME, not Mystical Agriculture storage, except for my Amphibian production. That stayed with the crafter. For the rest of this video, I will refer to Mystical Agriculture as MA, so it's easier to say. Just like the previous day, day 121 was spent working on just one small project that took quite a while. I hooked up all my sieve stuff to my ME storage, using importers and inverter cards to blacklist Blackstone Pebbles to send all there. This base is getting a lot of wires and cables everywhere now. Maybe I should try wireless AE2. Is there a wireless AE2? Someone leave a comment. In day 122, I upgraded my auto-crafting storage up to a 64K storage to handle bigger crafts. I was aiming to make the 1 million bulk storage, as I had initially assumed it had a disk drive with no item limit. Spoiler alert, it did not. I did need more power though, so I got to work on the spirited tier for power again. Don't worry, next 100 days I plan to make a full, massive reactor for power. Not sure if I want to do mechanism and absolutely struggle, or go for bigger reactors. This is just my starter power generation. I made my first spirited thermal generator, which set the generation from 1680 to 4200, more than double the previous tier. It was very quick work to upgrade the rest, and with all done, my network was finally fully stable. Finally. Before, the storage and a few generators had run dry, but now is perfectly fine here. All of the storages on the generators were maxed at all times. I then spent the rest of the day killing withers, forgetting to make a model framework from hostile neural networks of one again, so in day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 I made a deep learner and a model framework. Clicking on a wither with a model frame allows kills to progress the model and make it learn it. I finished getting it to basic tier, but still killed a few more. How Hostile Neural Networks, or HNN, works is that a simulation chamber that you place the model in simulates kills of a mob model inside the chamber. The higher tier the model, the more likely a simulated death pops out of Loot Fabricator. It did use power to operate, quite a bit for a wither, so I started going to Nitro tier with power. To make the final tier of crystal, Nitro crystals, it required 2 redstone blocks, a blazing crystal block, and a nether star in the energizing orb. And voila, in day 124 I made my first Nitro thermal generator, which upped production from spirited from 4200 FE per tick up to 9800 FE per tick, which again was over double. I really wish we had access to soul lava so I can get that to 21,000, but we're stuck at 9800. It's still really nice though. I then spent the rest of the day adding more land to my tiny island, expanding it to make room for a future building I was planning. With day 125, I was starting a new recording, so I updated the pack again, so I claimed a few quest rewards, which was mostly EXP. I spent this day upgrading the Wither model framework to basic tier. By the end of the day, I also remembered to make air and earth seeds to complete the quartet of elemental seeds I would need for awakening later. By later, I mean day 199. Literally. In day 126, it was time to start on the all-the-modium grind. It required several ingots from various mods, including thermal series mechanism and a couple of others. I wanted to make at least a stack of all-the-modium, and the recipe in the energizing orb made 3 bars per craft. So I started on the refined glowstone ingots from mechanism, making another osmium compressor, then turning into a basic compressing factory for 3 slots. All it needed was for me to put glowstone in the compressor with osmium as the infusing material. It was honestly really easy, kinda surprised me. Next was the flux-based ingot from the redstone arsenal mod. It was just gold, redstone, and a fire charge, so it was also pretty easy despite my dwindling redstone stores. But the goal of day 127 was the next few materials. So I made an alloy smelter from Ender IO, slapped the basic capacitor in it, then combined redstone, gold, and glowstone to make energetic alloy ingots, another automodium component. I then spent the rest of the day as those ingots were creating, expanding my platform more and more. Good thing I made dirt seeds. Lifesaver here. Deorum ingots was the next ingots I needed from the Forbidden Arcanist mod, so day 29 was all about that ingot, not about the base, about the ingot. It needed coal, mandibidibahadahadar dust, crafted from a bunch of mob drops, and arcane crystal dust, which was made from smelting arcane crystals, which was sieved from dust. I did want to go into FNA later on, so I used an igneous extruder with obsidian underneath, lava on one side, and blue ice on the other to make darkstone, the starting item for the questline. After material gathering and crafting, I made enough Darum ingots for all the monium I was going for. Only one material left to go, as I already did have nitro crystals, which also went into Aldemonium. The next day, day 129, was spent getting the last material, soul infused ingots from Thermal Series. Ugh, what a process. I made the pulverizer from Thermal Series to crush apatite, which I got from sieving sand, then crushed 3 soul sand per bar and 2 invar per bar. I did make some flux linkage amplifiers and an integral component to speed up the machine though. For each Thermal Series machine, you can add 3 amplifiers and 1 integral component to get the most speed out of the machines. With all the materials painfully gathered, I made the soul infused dust, then smelted it into the ingots. I wish these had a seed. Final component of Aldemonium achieved, I requested a stack of it for my ME and it worked. It actually worked first try, which almost never happens to me. It auto-crafted over a stack of Aldemonium bars, so I went right to making 4 blocks of it for mystical agriculture seeds, which was much more efficient than bee production in my opinion, and at this point since I had no bees. With day 130, I used 4 Insanium blocks, 4 Dragon Scales, which were obtained through killing the Ender Dragon, and an Insanium farmland to make the crux to grow Aldemonium, Vibranium, and Obsidian seeds. Like the Nether Star Crux, it went underneath the farmland to grow it. I then took 4 more Insanium blocks, 4 Aldemonium blocks, and a seed base to make Aldemonium seeds, which will grow into essence to craft Aldemonium nuggets, which I could then craft into the ingots. I took the ingots I had already made and used a netherite smithing template to make an Aldemonium template. What did I use with my first template? I made a hoe. Yep, a hoe. But why? Throughout these 130 days so far, I have been constantly needing to make diamond hoes for my harvester pylons. I've made probably 300 of them and was tired of it. Since Aldemonium is indestructible, it worked perfectly. No more diamond hoe crafting, at least for my Inferium plot. The others could wait. At this point, I had enough materials to auto-craft a 1 million storage component from AE2, so I started the craft and waited for it to finish, going into day 131, where I started to go down the Getting Started Chapter 2 section, making an electrolytic separator. What did it do? I have no idea. In these videos, I explain stuff if I understand it, and I honestly don't understand a darn thing with mechanism. I also made a purification chamber. It did a thing. After crafting those, my 1 million storage autocraft finished. It took 13 minutes in real time to complete. Yeah, I do need to speed up my auto-crafting next 100 days. Unfortunately, there was no disk drive that could be made from the 1 million storage. It was forced to use the 63 item limit version. Bummer. Still wasn't aware that I could use multiple disk drive housings on one ME network. To help out my storage, I made a cell workbench, which would allow me to partition different disks to allow only certain things to be stored inside them. For the 1 mil disk drive, I allowed only my MA essences to go into that one. It almost immediately went to 40k bytes used. Storage is a struggle. In day 132, I made another 250k storage disks, as my others were getting pretty full. I love automating resources, it makes me realize how good storage mods are. With another 256k made, I decided to start on a new large building that would house my new automation, phytogenic insulators. Throughout the day, I laid out the walls for it. I could easily make clay for bricks using water essence and dirt essence. MA is totally fair and balanced. Not. I continued this work into day 133, also expanding my island fortress out some more. In day 134, I started working on making PhytoGrow, which boosted the output of phytogenic insulators by 3 times. It was a bit of a process to make, with sand, niter, or saltpeter, and apatite going into it. There were multiple recipes, but I decided on the one that would make 8 at a time. I pulverized sand to get niter, then again to get niter dust. I used that to make seeds to produce essence that would go into potassium nitrate dust. I made sure to get at least 20 seeds for now and to max out my growth accelerators underneath to maximize their growth speed. I also made apatite seeds to get faster apatite production. But with all the production for the materials done, I made my first batch of PhytoGrow, also getting a pattern for it. I started laying out how I do my phytogenic insulators, which I will now refer to as PIs for the rest of the video. Of course, I made a pattern for those as well. Maybe I should make a pattern for patterns. Oh well. Throughout day 136, I worked on my PI setup, using an end gate to power them. Now to explain how I did the automation for it, skipping ahead in time a bit to show the completed setup with it running, or rather, pictures of it. Essentially, I have water coming in from the bottom, as the PEIs do need water to grow the seeds. The back of the machines was for the output of the seeds in essence. I had a barrel set up with an importer with an inverter card to put my essence into my ME storage, and a pipe to pull out the seeds. Those seeds would go through pipes and buffer barrels to be input into the sides of the PEIs along with PhytoGrow. I had pipes coming out of the barrels to pass the other seeds along, but blacklisted the seed meant for the machine it was going to in that pipe. Power input on the top, and it was all automated and ready to go. I'd add flux amplifiers and integral components to important seeds later on, not right now. It did still take me a bit to set up, so we flash back to the present to continue along, actually skipping to day 138, where I requested an autocraft of 1000 PhytoGrow. It actually went really quick, so I needed a way to get it into the PIs. I made a personal shrinking device, one of my favorite things ever in this pack, and started work on that. And at day 139, I still didn't finish as I was trying to do a stupid way of moving it instead of just using an exporter. I did make a charging pad for mechanism though to charge the personal shrinking device and any other tech on me that required power. I finally used an exporter on day 140 and set it to only move PhytoGrow over to my PI factory, then started to move all my seeds to their new home inside the PI network. It's fancier if I call it a network, trust me. To keep up with the power they would need, I upgraded all my thermo generators to Nitro tier, much quicker this time as I had a bunch of materials at the ready. After finishing, I returned to the PIs, hooking up an importer to the one my MA setup used. Day 141 had me retiring my old villager iron farm. I had iron automated with my sieves, and it was just noisy, so I took him away. I did keep the breeder and incubator though. The rest of the day was spent building the factory for my PIs as well as the PIs themselves. I also set another 1 mil storage to autocraft as the day ended, which finished in day 142. I partitioned it to only store outputs from my sieving automation to ease the other storage's loads. I then autocrafted a stack of PIs and resumed work on the factory, getting pretty close to completion with them. It was in the day 143 where I finally finished the line of PIs, setting up a recycle loop for PhytoGrow on day 144. Told you this would take a bit. If it didn't go into a PI, it would recycle through the system until it did. To mitigate potential lag, I made a pipe that would control the output of PhytoGrow to be redstone toggleable, so I need to flick a lever to allow PhytoGrow to go through the pipes. Skipping to day 146, as day 145 was spent finalizing the automation and moving my seeds over, I just spent this day cleaning all the former seed plots, instead of meaning to repurpose them just for inferium growth later on. I made dragon egg seeds, which grew essence that could be made into dragon eggs, then resumed work on my factory building. I made the tech before the actual building itself because I needed to set up the tech quickly so I could stop crafting diamond hoes so much. It was a really big relief not having to craft these hoes anymore. The day 147 had me adding thermal upgrades to important seeds, like redstone and aluminium. That's really all that I noted down in this day. I spent a lot of it on actually building the factory. In day 148, I also continued work on the factory while working towards blaze seeds. I used my press that I made in the last 100 days to compress the powder into rods, then used the soul extractor to make blaze jars. 4 of those and 4 tier 4 essence made the seeds, which I added to my PI network. To round out this day, I added yet another 256k disk drive to my ME. I swear, next 100 days I'm gonna take like 50 drive storages and add like 250k disk drive, so I never have to worry about storage again. Mark my words. With day 149, I was ready for some flight. It was a bit annoying to take a lot of fall damage from making the PI building, so I started to make a jetpack from the Iron Jetpacks mod. Initially, I only went up to steel tier, which was good for now. The downside was that it didn't have a true hover, instead hovering a hair of downward momentum to it. With the jetpack, I took throughout day 152, yes, 3 days to build out more of my island, finishing up the factory building, doing some cleanup to the surrounding area, and upgrading my steel jetpack to an emerald jetpack, which was the best jetpack I could get for now. With day 153, I started looking over Draconic Evolution. I do that a lot. One of my goals was indeed to kill the Chaos Guardian, which I had zero knowledge about. None, at all. I do like to go into things blind. I went to the end and, wait, why is there a check in here? Sought out the structure where the Chaos Guardian resides. These structures generated at every axis of 10,000 blocks out, so 10,000 by 10,000, negative 10,000 by negative 10,000, negative 20,000 by 20,000, and so on, with more at every 10,000th block further, like 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, and so on. It didn't take too long with my emerald jetpack, and I plopped the waste stone on a small end island right near the structure. It looked pretty cool. Wish my render distance was higher. I was definitely not ready yet, but I started the process, using Aldermodium to upgrade my armor up to Aldermodium. Now indestructible and had a lot of defense. Not enough for the Chaos Guardian just yet. In day 154, I decided to move my mini Ars Nouveau setup to my 3rd floor with my other magic nonsense. I'd come back to it later on for Vibranium, but for now it just collected dust. I added a chest and a pipe to my Insanium crafter so it can now output the Insanium blocks for easier access and so it eventually wouldn't fill up, instead of filling the barrel. I say chest, but I mean barrel. You get it. Days 155 through 157 went by without much happening. Of note, I got cow seeds on day 156 and dye seeds on day 157. Also, before this spot in my recording, I had made a small building to house bees. I did want to get into the bee mod at some point, so I made one of Creative, took a schematic of it, then fired it out with a schematic cannon from the Create mod. It was absolutely way too small for all the bees I'd want to make, so in between this video and the next, I'm going to make a bigger building. But I use this one for now. I use acacia wood because I hate it, but some friends challenge me to make a build look good with it. So let me roll a quick montage of the building. After it was all said and done, by day 158, with all the frame blocks filled in, I planted a flower next to a sapling and grew trees until I got a beehive, catching the bees with a mob yoinker, and then moving the beehive into this area with some flowers. Then on day 160, day 160? Yeah. Unfortunately, during recording days 158 through 160, a storm knocked out my power mid-recording, so those days were lost. I did remember what happened though. I made more metallurgy infuser upgrades and made one for each material they used. Haven't yet set up patterns with them though, and I do seriously need to redo the bottom floor of my monolith. I also made a brine producer as I wanted to finish the base mechanism chapter and get to the reactor. Why yes, I do overestimate my own capabilities all the time, without fail. Why do you ask? To finish the day, I made a chemical infuser. Do I know what it did? Nope, future burger problem. In day 161, I continue with the mechanism chapter, making refined obsidian dust by infusing obsidian dust, made from crushing obsidian, with diamond dust, made from crushing diamonds. No rebellion from this diamond dust this time. Very nice. If you get the joke, I apologize. I used the osmium compressor to make the dust into refined obsidian ingots, then made atomic alloy, the final tier of infused mechanism materials. It didn't use the refined ingots, but used the refined obsidian dust to infuse reinforced alloy, which was diamond infused alloy, which was redstone infused iron. Modded recipes be like. I used atomic alloy to make the chemical dissolution chamber, which did stuff I didn't understand. To finish this chapter and unlock the reactor section of mechanism, I made the rotary condensate concentrator and the chemical oxidizer. They all went into my ME storage for now until I felt confident enough to shoot for a mechanism reactor. Not yet. When day 162 began, I did some research into mob farms. By research, I just looked into JEI. I had already made one for possessed hoglins, but that used spawners. I wanted a full-blown mob farm from anything that moved. I mostly wanted ability totems and spider eyes from it, as I had no spider eyes. There were a few things I needed to do first. I needed a spider eye in the first place to get what I needed for the general mob farm, so I did some problem solving. Within Hostile Neural Networks, or HNN, simulating mob deaths made two items, predictions for the mob and generalized dimension predictions. If I simulated a chicken, for instance, it would simulate a drop that could be crafted into other drops, like spider eyes, and it also made a simulation that could be crafted into chicken drops. I crafted a simulation chamber, then made a model for chickens. I used the model in the chamber for a bit, then used the general overworld predictions to make spider eyes. Problem solving, bam! I used the spider eyes to make GM chicken feed, the cursed variant. I made the chickens explode to get myself a rotten egg. When thrown on dirt, it turned the dirt into evil dirt. I made a second mob masher for this one, then through day 163 I worked on the mob farm, using an absorption hopper to pick up the EXP and drops. I closed it all in with tinted glass, and it worked, mostly. Endermen continued to escape, so I made an Ender inhibitor. Endermen were still an issue after that, as they kept teleporting and getting stuck inside the glass behind the masher. Why? I have no idea, but I'm probably going to fix that later. After the farm was all done and working, I started on Apotheosis. I wanted to become more overpowered, and Apotheosis was a way to do it. So I started by making a dormant deep shelf out of deep slate and books. Then on day 164 I made hell shelves. Now, I get to explain Apotheosis enchanting. Each bookshelf in this mod, and all vanilla shelves, and even some items like skeleton skulls, all generate a certain item of Eterna, Quanta, or Arcana. Eterna determines the level of enchantment you see in the clues. The higher the Eterna, the higher the enchantments you see will be, even surpassing vanilla maximums. Quanta is the randomness of enchantments. High Quanta means higher curse likelihood. You can fix this with Rectification, which removes curses. Arcana makes more rare enchantments more common in the table. A perfect setup is 50 Eterna, 100% Quanta with 100% Rectification, and 100% Arcana. This can be obtained along with treasure enchantments through the questline. A maxed out setup required having over 100 EXP levels to actually do an enchant, but only cost about the same as vanilla, and can give up to 10 enchantments on one book. It is insanely strong. This mod is really good. With the starter setup, I took a hell shelf and infused it by putting it into an enchantment table with a specific amount of the 3 deciding energies. A base setup took all day, but on day 165 I made the enchantment library, easily one of the strongest parts about the enchanting segment of Apotheosis. You could place any enchanted book inside of it, consuming the book, and it stored levels of any enchantment you put in. You could then click the enchantment you want and pull a book of the highest level that allowed you if you had stored. For example, throwing in multiple Protection 4 books would allow you to pull out a Protection 7 book, as 7 is the highest this variant could allow to be pulled out. Think of it like an enchantment storage, because that's what it is. Only from books though, can't throw in items to get their enchantments off. I hope this explanation didn't make sense, and if it didn't, cope. After the enchantment library was made, I continued the progression, making a glowing hell shelf, then a deep shelf. The upgrades to deep shelves required echo shards, which fortunately could be sieved from netherite mesh and endstone, so I set up a small sieve thing to do so, getting a good amount of shards. I didn't make an automated one just yet though. I did still need to kill a warden a few times though to get the other deep shelf upgrade. I made a tablet of Conjure Deep Dark, then activated it, making a tiny Deep Dark island just a little bit off from my main island. I wouldn't yet kill a warden for their tendrils, cause I was still kind of weak. But I just continued working on the deep shelves, which frankly was a mistake, as they took vanilla candles only, couldn't use tallow. The reason it was a mistake was because it used honeycombs to make the candles. I should have thought ahead and made seeds for the honey, but I didn't at the time. Very, very huge loss of time for this little mistake. You'll see why in a bit. I also made Soul Touch Deep Shelves, the other upgrade branch of Deep Shelf. But why the 2 branches? Each one produced 5 Eterna, but one side of the upgrade path made 5% Quanta and 15% Arcana, and the other side made 15% Quanta and 5% Arcana. The echoing one also gave another enchanting clue, while the Soul Touch gave more rectification. A healthy balance is needed for the best enchants. I decided to take a small break from Apotheosis here to work on Apotheosis, but the actual gear section of this mod. I took some gems I had found during my last end trip and crushed them with a falling anvil to make arcane dust. I made a gem cutting table, which could upgrade gems into their better variant. I also made a salvaging table, which could take items with Apotheosis affixes and break them down into upgrade materials, which you can use to upgrade other stuff. I made them into the augmenting table, which could let me reroll affixes, which was very nice. And I also made the reforging table, which allowed me to apply affixes to items. I then spent the rest of the day, as well as day 167, looking through the end for legendary items to salvage. I found a few, and used the Godforged pearls from them to reforge my netherite sword to legendary. I also used the gems and an anvil to give 35% more attack speed to it, as well as plus 7 damage. In day 168, I discovered an entirely overpowered ability totem in the chest for my mob farm, Saturation. If you don't know what ability totems are, essentially you can activate them and use some EXP levels to just get that buff. This saturation one always filled my saturation bar up to the max, so I never needed to worry about hunger ever again in this run. So nice, I really dislike the hunger system in Minecraft. I then upgraded my sword to Aldomanium, then had a realization. I had had an Aldomanium pickaxe for ages, I just forgot to jot it down, and these could mine unobtainium. I didn't need to get vibranium yet. I could have had unobtainium for a while. Like a dum-dum, I rushed to where I found a piece of ore sticking out of the ground last episode and dug it up. I needed 8 twin ore total to double to 36 so I could make enough blocks to make the seeds. So I tore apart an highlands, as that's where they spawn, searching for some unobtainium, getting 19 ore by the time I got bored. When I returned home, I doubled it with the ore hammer, then smelting it, crafting the ingots I obtained into 4 blocks. I triumphantly made the seeds for them and added them to my network. Yes, I did obtain a tier 3 Harmon ore before the tier 2. Sometimes when Orichalcum doesn't spawn, you gotta go with Adamantite. Terraria joke, zing! Anyways, to end out the day, I made Draconium seeds, as I wanted to start Draconic Evolution soon, so I wanted to have the essence for the ingots built up enough. On day 169, I trained a data module of a warden to eventually put in my eventual HNN network, the one I didn't have because I forget this mod a lot. I got it to basic, then looked after my bees, who I also forgot about, and here's where the use of honey earlier is biting me back. I was so dead set on getting the Apotheosis enchant stuff done, I decided not to make the seeds at first, thinking it would take too long, and I was wrong. The whole of day 170 was spent babysitting the bees, shearing honeycombs for candles every chance I could get. I would definitely have enough bees for when I got into the bee mod eventually, as I kept breeding them and making more hives. I slept into day 171, the first sleep of this 100 days as far as I can remember. I sieved a bit of dirt for melon seeds, wanting to get melon shelves. I killed a wandering trader and twerked the melons to full growth throughout the day. I made 10 melon shelves and infused dragon's breath to make infused dragon's breath. It went into a draconic end shelf, one of the pieces for the maxed out Apotheosis setup. Infused dragon's breath wasn't used for anything else, literally. It made 3 on infusion, but you only needed the 1. I also made 3 sea shelves, needing for an eventual shelf of infused rectification for the max setup. In day 172, I needed more pufferfish as I mistakenly infused the seashells, thinking I needed the infused ones for the final setup. So I dared to step foot into the industrial foregoing mod. Ooh, so spooky. I had never used this mod, so it was brand new to me. I started off with the pity machine frame, made from iron, a redstone block, and wood. It went into a fluid extractor, which could extract latex from logs, acacia being the best. It was pretty slow, as I was only using one machine, but I got a bucket eventually. I made a latex processing unit, which could take water and latex and process it in dry rubber, which could then be smelted into plastic. Modded recipes. I took the plastic and made a dissolution chamber, which was almost like a crafting table with a lot of things that didn't make sense. All I wanted was the marine fisher from it, so I made a simple machine frame, then the marine fisher, which auto-fished. So one day 173, I made a small pool of water so it could work. It needed power, but auto-fished up stuff from water and put it into the internal inventory. I used a pipe to put it into a barrel though, and an end gate to power it using my ender cell power storage. With the fisher active, I resumed my Apotheosis mission, making the deep shelf of arcane treasures, which allowed treasure enchantments to be rolled as you enchanted. I slept into day 174 and spent that day just working with the bees, wasting time by continuing to make candles for the shelves instead of the seeds. I did the same in day 175 and into day 176 where I finally decided to just screw it and make the seeds. Huge time waste sleeping through the nights to get the bees to emerge from their nests. Really annoyed at myself. I added the honey seeds to my PI network, then used the essence to make the honey I needed. I made the final several shelves I needed for a max level setup and placed it all on my second floor. I wanted to enchant a bunch of books, but I was always running out of sugarcane for paper, so in day 177 I made Nature Seed, which could use the essence to make sugarcane. It was nice. Throughout the rest of the day I got back into occultism for a really stupid reason, but a worthy reason. You'll see why. I started on a new ritual, making a book of binding for Djinni on day 178. I started the ritual, and after a minute I summoned a waifu. Yep, the most important thing I could be doing right now. I grabbed a name tag from the fisher and named my new demon waifu Frankie. I looked into some more rituals and saw one for a freaking dragon familiar, but there was one problem. I had no horses to sacrifice. There was currently no way to summon horses either, so I couldn't, unfortunately, summon a little dragon buddy. Very sad. I did summon something else though, a little deer familiar that gave me a jump boost. I wanted an army of familiars, but a majority of them unfortunately required horse sacrifices. Bummer. With new friends, it was time to finally start on the Draconic Evolution mod. I started with making a Draconium core from Draconium ingots and some other materials. It was the base for most things in this mod, required for a lot of recipes. I also made the Fusion Crafting Core, which was the main crafting station for the mod, used to craft tools and weapons among other things. With day 179, so close to the end, I made 10 Draconium Fission Crafting Injectors. What a mouthful. I could place them in a plus shape on either side of the Fusion Crafting Core. At first, I didn't realize the injectors need power, so a lot of the day was spent fumbling around and not knowing what to do until day 180, yes I spent a whole day on that, where I decided to try powering the injectors. And it worked! With a nice fancy animation, I made a chest. It was a quest, okay? I then started to upgrade my injectors to the next tier, Wyvern tier. It took a bit as the bottom injectors were bugged and being blocked by the small crystals underneath the crafter, which was a bit weird. You'd think it would go diagonal, but nah, I needed the full space. I finished the injectors in day 182 as I spent the whole of day 181 on them, as well as changing my plots of empty farmland to produce inferium now, with item pipes all moving the production to the crafter. With these new injectors for Draconic Evolution, I made the Wyvern bow using a bow and some DE materials. I gave it a basic energy module to start, as it required power to use. In this mod, power is called OP, but it's just RF or FE. It's just a third name of it as it's still a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm just still gonna say FE. With the bow crafted, finishing in day 183, I killed another wandering trader with it, then hunted in the end for Draconium dust, as my essence production wasn't high enough right now. The dust could be smelted into the ingots, and I would need a lot of the ingots. When I returned home, I made a Wyvern capacitor. Then in day 184, I used the dragon heart that I had gotten from taking down the Ender Dragon to make the Awakened Draconium block. At the time, I wasn't aware there was a seed for it. Literally, as I was typing the script, I had the game open to look stuff up, just to double check my notes, and I just found, while typing, that there is, in fact, a seed for Awakened Draconium. That will be the very first thing I do on day 200 for the next video, as this recipe is annoying to do, requiring a whole dragon fight just for 36 ingots, and that stuff went by fast. I made ingots from the blocks, then made a Draconic core, going up to the next tier. I worked on upgrading my injectors throughout the rest of the day, as upgrading them allowed me to craft with the next tier and speed up any previous tier that I needed. I fought the Ender Dragon 4 more times throughout day 185. Annoying. I finished getting all my injectors to the next tier, then ended the day by starting the craft of upgrading my Wyvern bow to a Draconic bow. The craft finished in day 186. It dealt a bit more damage and had more space for modules, but I wasn't all done. I started crafting all the Wyvern tier tools to upgrade later on into Draconic. They all had the same recipe, just with diamond tools for their types. I made the Wyvern sword, Wyvern pickaxe, Wyvern axe, Wyvern shovel, Wyvern hoe, and the Wyvern chest piece. I made an auto fire module for my bow, which allowed it to be full auto, and made a shield module for my chest piece, giving it a shield. I upgraded the shield control module to Wyvern tier in day 187, then I upgraded said shield control module to Wyvern tier in day 187, then I made it to Draconic tier. They were just crafted, they didn't use the fusion crafter, which was actually kinda nice. I took some time to use my overpowered Apotheosis enchanting setup to enchant a bunch of books, throwing them into my enchantment library to use later. For the rest of the day, I added a new sieve to my auto sieve area, Endstone. I used an extractor on top of an Endstone block, which was on top of a purple block, to automatically create Endstone. I sieved it with a netherite mesh to produce more draconium dust, as well as some skulk related things, hooking it up to my netherite furnace so it'll smelt the dusts into ingots. That finished in day 188. The pipe I used was whitelisted to only allow draconium dust in. The rest went into my general ME storage. When the draconium dust was melted into ingots, that went into my main storage. I then started to upgrade my gear further, making my helmet legendary with Godforged Pearls and Sigils of Rebirth in the Reforged table. I needed a lot more Godforged Pearls, so I explored the end for the rest of the day and into day 190, a full 2 days, when I decided to return home. Took me a bit to sort my loot, but when I salvaged all the legendary gear I found, it netted me a whopping 20 Godforged Pearls. Very nice. That was definitely enough to upgrade the rest of my gear. The rest of the day was spent reforging my gear. First my leggings, then my chest, then my boots. I actually felt pretty confident about taking on the Chaos Guardian at this point. Haha, what an idiot I am. In day 191, I reforged my Draconic Bow to Purple Tier, as it was out of Godforged Pearls at this point. One of the bonuses made it so I had a chance to shoot a second arrow. I then enchanted the heck out of it, and it was like a machine gun now, which was very funny. The last thing I wanted before trying the Chaos Guardian was a Draconic Sword, so I did just that, upgrading my sword from Wyvern to Draconic. I then decided it was time to try out the Chaos Guardian. The fight from the description seemed simple enough. Bait it into attacking its own crystals, then smack the crystals until they explode. Sound easy, right? Wrong. I got absolutely shredded. He hit the crystal I was at multiple times, but it never exploded. So, I died. Yeah, it was a bit awkward. There's this laser that insta-killed me. Not fun. When day 192 came, I went right back, and this fight took a little bit longer as he summoned a bunch of withers that kept flying higher and higher into the sky as I got slammed to the ground. Yeah, it didn't go well. I got killed again. But with this, I decided to retire from the fight for now, either upgrading to invincibility or waiting for the boss to get nerfed if it does. Either or, we'll see. I started the road to upgrading myself, however, working towards Vibranium. I needed to start into blood magic, so I made a sacrificial dagger out of glass and some ingots. I also made a blood altar. I could place the altar down and use the dagger to cut myself like it was an emo in the early 2000s to fill it with blood, or life essence to use a PG term. All I needed was to get 1 bucket's worth and I was done for now. The ritual for Vibranium needed 1 bucket for every 3 bars crafted, which was nice. I got my 12 buckets, as I only needed 36 bars of Vibranium total for the seeds, then got to work on Ars Nouveau section for Vibranium crafting. It wanted 1 of each of the elemental essences for it, so 12 total for each for me. I crafted a Vitalic Source Link and a ton of Source Jars. The Vitalic Source Link made source from a mob breeding or deaths near it, and I just happened to have a mob farm. It's a win-win. Throughout the rest of the day and into day 193, I spent that time getting all the essences I could. Water, earth, fire, and air. Water was made from a water bucket, snow, kelp, and a source gem, only consuming the source gem. Earth was made from seeds, dirt, an iron ingot, and a source gem. Fire from a torch, gunpowder, flint and steel, and a source gem. And air from a Wilden Wing, a feather, an arrow, and a source gem. As the night rolled on, I made 12 of each essence, 12 buckets of life, grabbed 36 Insanium essence, and 12 Allemanium bars. I placed all of them on the ritual pedestal, then the Allemanium last to start the ritual, making my very first Vibranium. I happily made seeds out of them, with 4 blocks of it and 4 blocks of Insanium, adding the seeds to my PI network. With only 6 days left for this challenge, in day 194 I was actually starting to feel the stress of the days left coming on. I spent most of this day upgrading my PIs with flux linkage amplifiers and integral components. It did take a bit, as soul-infused FLAs take a while to craft, it's a bit annoying. Soul-infused ingot recipe is annoying, and there's no seed currently. All the mods team, if you get to this point, please, soul-infused ingot seeds. I'd love you a long time. By the end of the day, I had several PIs with soul-infused upgrades, so I went back to blood magic, using a diamond on the blood altar to make a weak blood orb. It stored life energy within it, and was used for some crafting. In day 195, I used string on the altar to make a soul snare. I could snare a mob with it, then kill it to get will. This will was used for crafting later on. I placed stone on the altar to make blank slates, which then went into blank runes. I used 4 of them to make 4 speed runes, which were then placed under and around the altar, which could speed up crafting and make the altar into a tier 2 altar. With a tier 2 altar, I made a dagger of sacrifice by placing an iron sword on it. I could kill mobs near it to put blood in the altar instead of taking it for myself, but I didn't want to do that. I made an apprentice blood orb, then made 20 more blank runes to upgrade my altar to tier 3, and on day 196, I made a few more stations from this mod, the Hellfire Forge and the Alchemy Table. With the Hellfire Forge, I made a Petty Tartaric gem, which stored will inside of it instead of dropping it as a physical item. The process of getting will was annoying, so I decided to not do it for now, I'd do it later. At the end of the day, I went back to Thermal Series upgrades as I wanted to try and finish my goal of getting Unobtainium gear by the end. I actually had plenty of Unobtainium, which was enough to upgrade all my gear, but the Vibranium was the issue right now. I had made it way too late in this run, but I might as well try to get it. I started to make seeds for a bunch of Thermal Series ingots, starting with Enderium. I added it to my network on day 197 alongside Signalum seeds. I got 9 total tier 2 amplifiers and 3 components for my Aldemonium, Vibranium, and Unobtainium PIs. I wanted them fast, so I made Lumium seeds and got all of them to their tier 3 versions. For amplifiers, Enderium tier. For components, Resonant, which used Enderium. I hooked them all up inside the machines, then took the rest of the day to compact all hundreds of thousands of materials that have been gathering up over time. There was a lot, so it actually took me about 10 minutes, just crafting the ingots into blocks, and then crafting those blocks into 1 times compressed, 2 times compressed, all the way into day 198, 2 days left. I would absolutely need to buff my storage for the next 100 days. In this day, I searched for a bit of prosperity shards in the end, as I wanted to end this episode on a high note by awakening a weapon from MA. I started on the crafting chain for the sword, starting with Inferium. Each sword used 2 bars of their tier and 2 crystals, so 8 essences each of each tier except Insanium. I made the Inferium sword, then the Prudentium, then the Tertium, then the Imperium, and finally the Supremium sword. I enchanted it with Mystical Enlightenment 7, which allowed kills on Withers or End Dragons to drop Cognizant Dust, needed for Awakening. I killed a Wither and it dropped enough, so in day 199, I got to Awakening, making an Awakening altar, 4 pedestals, and 4 vessels. Remember the water, fire, earth, and air seeds I made earlier? This is what they're for. I placed 1 type in each vessel, Cognizant Dust on the pedestals, and a Supremium Essence block in the center. Hitting the button made a block of Awakened Supremium Essence, which could be downcrafted into Awakened Supreme Essence. With 8 of the Essence, I made 2 ingots and 2 crystals, and with more Elemental Essence, I awakened my Supremium Sword. I told you it was day 199. This sword was indestructible, just like my Aldemonium one. And with that, I was pretty much out of time as the sun was starting to set. However, I still wanted to shoot for as much Vibranium armor as I could get. By the end of the day, I managed to make a template and get my helmet upgraded to Vibranium. Very unfortunately, I could not do the full armor set, but I would do so in the next 100 days. The final thing I did in the final day of this run was get a Dragonsteel Integral component, another annoying recipe with no seed, made from Dragon's Breath, Crushed Appetite, and Netherite Dust. It was the best upgrade I could do right now, speeding up my machines by 6 times, and the highest recommended for the MA questline. As the day rose, I reflected on my goals for this run. Goal number 1, maximize storage. Check. Kinda. I could do better, but I absolutely had enough storage for this 100 days. Goal 2, Unobtainium gear. Failed. I made Vibranium way too late in this run, but it's okay because I can get it really quick into the next 100 days. Goal number 3, swap my MA setup to use phytogenic insulators. Absolute, resounding success. I have insulators still open for future seeds, which is nice. Goal number 4, Apotheosis. Another huge success. I have a max setup now for any future armor I would make, like maybe mech armor for Mechanism, potentially? And the final goal I had was to kill the Chaos Guardian, which was a hilarious failure. I got a bit too ambitious there, but I'm gonna work towards becoming stronger the next 100 days, maybe enough to challenge it and kill it by day 300? We'll see. I haven't started recording that yet. Speaking of 300 days, I do intend to do this pack until the end, which could take upwards of 500 to 600 days. Plenty more to come from the burger, and remember to leave your suggestions of things I can do in the comments below. I do read all comments, and do take suggestions to heart. If you would like a world download of this world as well, I have it on my Patreon for my only tier at the moment. Support your local burger, I do videos. And with that, the journey to 200 days is complete and my voice is gone. I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching. Bedrock Burger, out.